Si rimane fino alla fine. No, Bene, buongiorno a tutti. Mi danno segnale che l'evento online è iniziato, quindi siamo qui per questo evento di chiusura dell'edizione 2024 del Galileo Festival. Farò una brevissima intro in italiano, ma poi appunto il nostro ospite è internazionale e quindi l'evento si svolgerà in lingua inglese. Avete visto in questi giorni appunto che tutti gli appuntamenti del Galileo Festival sono iniziati con un avatar di intelligenza artificiale che parlava appunto di come cultura, ricerca, scienza e innovazione siano strumenti fondamentali per un futuro sostenibile. Quindi abbiamo deciso di concludere questa manifestazione proprio partendo da un elemento di base, l'acqua, che è un elemento fondamentale per la vita ed è un elemento fondamentale per un futuro sostenibile ed è un elemento fondamentale anche per lo sviluppo della tecnologia. Molto spesso noi lo diamo così per scontato che non ci rendiamo conto appunto di quali siano le innovazioni, le tecnologie, gli sviluppi scientifici che vi sono collegati. Vi presento velocemente gli ospiti. Abbiamo da Parma Alessandro Bratti, segretario generale dell'Autorità di Bacino Distrettuale del Po. Spero di non aver detto male, ok, è corretto. Facciamo un applauso. E poi alla mia destra Olof Lundqvist, Senior Scientist dello Stockholm International Water Institute e autore di questo libro appunto che si intitola La tempesta perfetta, Acqua, cibo e 8 miliardi di consumatori, che è uscito da un paio di mesi per i tipi di post editori e che racconta appunto alcuni dei temi che andremo ad affrontare oggi. Da questo momento si passa all'inglese. Welcome, Professor Lundqvist. It's a pleasure to have you here in Padova. First of all, I would like to thank you for accepting our proposal to write this book that is fundamental, both for the activity of raising the awareness of the situation with water nowadays. We often hear about issues with water, water scarcity, climate change, floods, droughts, problems that are related to water, but as common citizens we have very little knowledge of how water systems works. And this is why it's particularly important to have a contribution as a leading world expert on the topic in order to understand, to have a better understanding of the issues that we are currently facing as a planet. The title goes by saying 8 billion consumers, and the 8 billion consumers that you are referencing in the title, it's us, mankind. So it's something that see our involvement in the very first place. In my introduction in Italian, while welcoming you, I was saying that our AI avatar, Sofia, was mentioning that science and culture, innovation and research are fundamental in order to promote a sustainable future for humanity and for our planet. And I would like to start from here. The very first pages of your book are of paramount importance to highlight how the concept of civilization, the great civilizations that inhabited our planet, were always connected both to water and to technological developments. So I would like to start from there in order to get into the context of this Galileo Festival. And again, thanks for accepting our invitation and welcome to Padova.
I would like to reciprocate the thanks. Thank you, Antonio, very, very much for asking me to prepare the manuscript for this book. I was a bit hesitant the first time you asked me, but then gradually you convinced me, and I'm very grateful for your persistent questioning and also for the translation. And I'm very honored to be here in Padua at the Galileo Festival together with you and also with Alessandro, who is working on these issues in practice in terms of implementing different ideas and, of course, policies. So I'm very, and as you say, Antonio, I think this is also an attempt to increase awareness, consciousness, not only among the farmers who produce the food, who use the water, and other water users, but also among us as consumers, because when we eat the food, we also literally eat the water that goes into the production of the food. Without water, there's no food. There's nothing, really. But it started much earlier, as you indicated, Antonio. It started with the ancient civilizations. You are familiar with the fantastic development in Egypt about 5,000 years ago. That is, and together with Mesopotamia in Euphrates, Tigris, there are similar societies in China, in India, Sri Lanka, in Latin America, where water, the control of water, the management of water has been a key factor in the rise of the civilizations, and of course also increase in food production. Now, what was in terms of technology and innovation, what were the key factors in the development of these early civilizations? They are also called the hydraulic societies. Hydraulic means control of water through technical means. But they're also called flood cultures to suggest that these cultures, and you can imagine Egypt, it's the Nile who is the main pillar of Egyptian development, both then, 5,000 years ago, and now. And the same in Mesopotamia and in other parts of the world. So the technology that was developed around 5,000 years ago, I think was when you talk about technology innovation, maybe it would be better to describe it in terms of human ingenuity. They were very skillful in managing the water through different earthen bunds. They built different kind of structures in the landscape to control, to direct the water, but also to control the floods. So it was both a water supply and to reduce the risk of flooding. Now, this society, they were developed around, 3,000 years before Christ, lasted till about a little bit after Christ, so about 3,000 years. And how was it possible in terms of management? Now we talk about the need to combine government, legal and different kind of management inputs from the government, from different agencies. At that time, it was very much the central authorities, the governments at that time, and the ruling party, together with religion, that controlled both people and water. So by controlling control was very important, both of people and water, because they needed huge amount of labor to build these earthen structures. So, but you can also see that in those days that these kind of efforts, they permeated also culture, religion. And if you look upon the first calendar in Egypt, the first month of the year was the month when the flood came. And you know, the water in Egypt doesn't come vertically, it doesn't come by the rain, it comes horizontally with the river. And it comes from equatorial Africa around Lake Victoria and from the highlands of Ethiopia. And then it follows the river Nile and enters into the Egypt. So this is the start of the civilization. Now that was many, many years ago. Now, I think we'll come back to that also when Alessandro is talking. We had the second wave, I would say, of these hydraulic structures developed around 1950s, 60s, or started 1930s, really. With the development of the so-called Green Revolution, I think you might come back to that, Antonio. But, you know, compared to the ancient period of hydraulic cycle was to control water for food, but also for water supply. But now we have a control of water for hydropower. We have the control of water of course, for urban development, for regional development. So there is a difference in terms of magnitude of the technology. And of course, the contemporary technology and knowledge is more sophisticated. But in a sense, it is the same in terms of there's a requirement of a central agency, government or commissioner or something like that, who dictates to lower parts of the hierarchy. Maybe we'll come back to what's happening more recently. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Mr. Alessandro Bratti, General Secretary of the Po District Authority. Professor Lundqvist defined both ancient and current civilizations as flood civilizations, and I cannot but recall that in just a couple of weeks the first anniversary of the Emilia-Romagna flood will be celebrated, even if it's nothing to celebrate. So I don't want to point anything about what happened at the time, but I would like you to discuss how a tragedy that affected the Emilia-Romagna region a year ago became an opportunity for a better understanding of how to control a situation that is becoming more and more current.
Thank you so much, Antonio, for this invitation. It's a pleasure for being here to talk again with Jan. That is, of course, a brilliant scientist, but it's also a friend. Well, first of all, let me say that when we talk about what's happening in Romagna region, we have, of course, to talk what is the climate change, what is the extreme events, and what is the particular place where it's happened, these extreme events. We are talking of a hotspot region because all the basin now it has, let's say, 9 kind of climate compared to the Germany, all the countries that have 5. So it's considered by IPCC an hotspot. So you have to think about it. Because the events that's happened in last May was really an extraordinary event, but that you have to consider, according also to the study of a scientific commission that was set up by Emilia-Romagna region, that the frequency that could happen is not so large that it was that we thought before. So it's important to have probably a different approach to the land management. I mean, the land management, if we think how was this kind of territories, that was swamp territories. So the hydraulic engineering really did a really great job, because those regions at the end of the last century probably was the poorest regions of Europe. Now, after this huge infrastructure, it became one of the richest regions of Europe. But what is happening now, and what's happened last year, make you thinking in a different way and find different different tools for increase the defense of these territories. So this is why now we have worked on, in according with the special commissioner, we have an extraordinary commissioner on the reconstruction of the region to set up different measures that we can say three kinds of measures mainly. One is we call win-win measures, that it means that you intervene both in quality and the quantity of the water. For example, we have a huge plan that was financed by EU Next Generation, I mean PNRR, that is called renaturation of the Po River, that it counts more or less 350 million of euro. That is the goal is a kind of renaturation of some part of the river, because in this way, how do you say, after this huge job, probably the river will be more suitable to tackle the climate change. And also to protect wetland, it's important, both from quality and both for quantity. So this we call win-win measures that we put inside the plan. And then we have also a bunch of so-called gray measures, like, for example, probably one of the most important is controlled flooding. That means that you have to intervene to force the river to flood in the areas that you retain are the less vulnerable. Because when the river floods by itself, you have a really huge damage. So this is we call the gray measure. Another measure that we think is very important, that it's kind of really simple, that is delocalization, like to move, to invest money to move civilians and also industry from a really dangerous area in another one. That is, it's not easy. It's easy to say, it's not easy to do, also because it's also a social problem, not just economical one. And then we have a problem of governance, the third point. I mean, for example, I just approved a decree to stop the urbanization, to stop the building in the area where we have had the flooding. Until we have a new plan, a new strategic plan. That is kind of new in Italy, it's not so common, you know. Another one is to work, of course, if we talk about flooding, not drought, that is a different problem. Also to increase the early warning, because even if you do everything of these measures, you have to think that you cannot eliminate the risk. You can reduce, but not eliminate. So also awareness, also information, the early warning, it's really important to save human life.
I wanted to ask you just to specify one thing about these projects that you're currently working on, the reconstruction project. So you have the overall plan, you have the financial part set, and you also have the governance set. Do you have a chronological timeline? Like when?
Well, let's say we just approved the preliminary plan just 2 weeks ago, and in June of this year we will have we need to approve definitely the plan. We really don't know how much money we have. That is one of the critical points, of course, because we have the ideas, we have the plan, we have the measures, we know what to do. But we need to know how much money is available.
All right, that would make a difference. Okay, let's go back to Professor Lundqvist. So we, in the first part of this talk, we've been discussing the issue of water management, basically. One thing that always comes to mind when we talk about water nowadays is the topic of water scarcity and the idea that water is not enough for our consumption, for the industry, for agriculture. In the book, you highlight that it's not a matter of water scarcity, because as a matter of fact, the quantity of water that is currently on the planet is exactly the same that there was like billion of years ago, but it's a matter of a lack of a scarcity of our skills to manage water and to use water. Can you elaborate on this, please?
Yes. Is it on? Yes. I'm sorry. I think from what Alessandro mentioned also, I mean, today we see a combination of droughts and floods, and also landslides. And in connection with drought, we also have forest fires, and we have wreckage, principally, of the landscape. So it's a combination between too little water and too much water, and water at the wrong time. And as Antonio was saying, that we have, in principle, we have the same amount of water in the world today as our forefathers had 1,000 years ago or many, many years ago. The water is always circulating through what we call the hydrological cycle. The sun is heating up the water and the landscape, and water is evaporating and transpiring back to the atmosphere, and then it falls back as transpiration. That's an internal movement of water. So in that sense, there is no scarcity of water in a basic sense, but there is a difference. There is a new situation now in the sense that we have relatively more water now in the atmosphere and I think in the oceans as compared to what we have in the terrestrial systems in the landscape. This is very, very important. So there is a very important study, I think, published in the leading journal, Science, last year, actually. They have calculated, they have monitored the water level in lakes in the whole world. And they found that the amount of water in lakes and reservoirs has been reduced by about equivalent of 12 Lago di Garda in 30 years. Because the water has been going up to atmosphere because of the higher temperature. Now, we don't know exactly how the water comes down again, but you have seen now a couple of weeks ago, there was a tremendous downpour over Dubai, for instance. And we had, last summer, we had a similar type of event in the coastline of Libya, and you have had it here in Po region, as Alessandro was mentioning, that there are sudden downpours of very extreme types, with huge, it's like the sky is opening, and a huge amount of water is falling upon landscapes and also upon the oceans in a short period of time. And when the water comes in that magnitude in a short period of time, it's very, very difficult to manage it. You can't control it. So I think that what Alessandro was mentioning about the controlled flooding, that is very innovative, and I think that is very important. How can we help farmers? How can we make different people working with the landscape to retain a larger share of the water that falls upon us? That is a huge task. But in principle, yes, the amount of water is the same, but it is distributed geographically and temporally in a new manner, which makes it very difficult for farmers, which is very difficult for hydropower installations, which make it difficult for transport and for society.
In the book, you often refer to rainwater harvesting as a possible solution to face the challenge of water scarcity for farmers especially. But you also highlight that rainwater harvesting has to be put into context because it could actually be the solution to the problem, but also create a new challenge for the communities that are living downhill from the river. Yeah. So can you please let us know a little bit about this?
Antonio has read my manuscript very, very well. He knows it better than I do now.
I'm checking you out.
So that is, and also Alessandro, I know. Yes, I think that is a good point. And when we talked about the hydraulic societies in the past, and when we talk about the water management, for instance, in California today, with huge reservoirs, very sophisticated structures and conveyance systems and all that, it's the management of water that is already on the ground, in reservoirs, in lakes and such things. Now, as I mentioned before, the amount of water in those reservoirs is declining. So we have to find new ways to try to retain as much water as possible. And one thing is what Alessandro was mentioning about the controlled flooding, by building bunds or whatever it is to keep the water in place. But another idea is to try to capture the water when it's raining, rainfall harvesting. That has been a big idea in Asian countries and African countries. And the idea is that by capturing the rainfall, either by rooftop harvesting in urban areas, you can use the roofs of houses to control the water, to capture the water and lead it into the basement where you can have different storage facilities. But also in the landscape, you can build small, I think that is very close to what Alessandro is mentioning about building small earthen bunds, where you stop the flow of water and make the water infiltrate down into the ground. Now, we used to say that the water that we have in the landscape, on top of the landscape, so to speak, in rivers and in lakes, that we call the blue water, because that's the water that's blue on maps. Now, the water below the surface, that's the moisture, soil moisture. And that is what makes the landscape green. That's what the crops are drinking, so to speak. And that we call green water. And that is the fundamental water source for farmers in Africa, and they don't have irrigation facilities, most of them. 5% or so of the agriculture in Africa is irrigated. In Sweden, and I think in many parts of Italy also, farmers rely on green water, the soil moisture. So there are now a lot, but in terms of investments, in terms of policies, most of the attention has been paid to the blue water. So we now see that there is a potential to increase the water availability by increasing the soil moisture. And but that's also, as Antonio is indicating, that's also a risky strategy, because it means that if there are periods of droughts, no rainfall, then we don't have soil moisture either. And it's also a bit problematic, because if the farmers, for instance, in one area, if they are successful in capturing the rainfall, local rainfall, and if they use the water for cropping or for agriculture, it means that there's less water coming into the rivers. So it could potentially mean that the downstream part, the estuary, is affected by an efficient strategy where you contain the. So I think there is a trade-off, and there is I think the best strategy probably is to combine irrigation with a good land soil management.
Alessandro Bratti, do you want to add on this?
Yeah, I completely agree, of course, with Dion. But first of all, you can understand how it's complex, these matters, that sometimes you have some political decision making. that try to simplify the problem that is really, really very complex. And there is written an important concept, I think, in the book when Jan say the supply cannot follow the demand. Because you have a lot of risk to do stuff like that, especially you have a risk for ecosystem and also an incredible cost increase for the social system. So that is very important. And it's also important to understand that the water is almost the same. If I focus on the Po River Basin, historically, more or less, we have at least 80 billions of meters cubes of water that rains, each year. Half of this water, of course, flow to the sea, but the water that you use for different kind of economic items are distributed in this way. You have an amount of 20 billions of meter cubes of water, and 12 billions of water are used by irrigation, by agriculture, as only 3% by drinkable water. Then, so you can understand how it's important, the connection between agriculture, irrigation, food, of course, and drought problems. So, if we talk of Italian needs, I have some data here. The last report of a commissioner in charge of drought reports the needs in investment to maintain the status quo in Italy. I mean, just to say, and according to this article that came out from Sole 24 Ore, we need more or less 13.5 billions of euro. And on this amount, the priority of Po Basin is more or less 1 billion of euros. And we are talking just of drought problem, not of flooding or landslides tackle. So I think that a point that is also underlined in the book of Jan, that of course you have to take a look to the traditional infrastructure. But you also need to think in a different way, also in this case. For example, it's, in my opinion, very interesting, the proposals that came from a farmer association and also for AMBI, that is the Association of Consortium of Irrigation, that there is a huge plan that is cost not a little bit a lot, but it's very interesting because it's supposed to have a really small lakes distributed in all the country. That this kind of idea is particularly suitable with the kind of agriculture that we have, that is not based on big, huge land. No, the property is really small land, so the farmers, small properties. And for example, in the River Po Basin, using technology from the space, we found that we have potentially at least 12,000 of pit lakes that we could use, potentially of course, that we could use to store water. So another time, the approach needs to be a multi-level approach, also in this case, because first of all you have to intervene in the demand of the water. So, and the demand is not easy. I mean, the question is, this kind of agriculture that we have now, is the agriculture that is able to support this kind of water scarcity? First, no? This is a question. But because the agriculture is very important, because from economical point of view, from the social point of view, we have quality. Our agriculture is very high quality. It's also important to understand how to improve. In one hand, the irrigation system, for example. In the other hand, to build up reservoir to respond to the need immediately that the agriculture needs, of course. So it's a kind of complex situation. You have to use different way to tackle this problem of drought and problem of flooding, that are the two coins of the same problem, that is extreme events connected to climate change.
Thank you. We are just a couple of minutes away from the conclusion of our event and a couple of minutes away from lunchtime. So we've been talking about agriculture. And I would like Professor Lundqvist to conclude this part by addressing the audience with a call to action. The book covers the topic of food production and mostly the topic of food consumption. And how, when we're talking about water scarcity, it's agriculture as the main sector that uses water that could actually contribute to facing and addressing this challenge. So can you conclude this event by pointing out how our relationship to food could actually contribute to solving this issue?
Yes. Yeah, I think we have to look upon both sides of the coin, both the production side, how to make best possible use of limited and very erratically available water that Alessandro was mentioning about, but also the other side, namely the use of the food and the demand for the food. And as Antonio's question is that I think we have seen a dramatic increase on the demand side, but also on the production side of food. So and that is driven by population increase. Today the population is, as given in the title here, about 8 billion people in the world. And when I grew up in the 50s, 60s, we had less than 3 billion. So that's increased from 3 to 8, and we are most likely around 10.5 billion at the end of this century. And most of these people are in areas where water is very limited, very erratic, where the heat is on 24 hours a day. So there is a feeding problem in that part of the world, certainly. Now, the other driver of the increasing food demand is the increasing wealth, increasing income. If you look upon economic statistics in the world, the amount of money that we have available, the purchasing power of people, it has increased faster than the population has increased. We have relatively more money in each person's pocket today in Sweden, in Italy, in Europe, in US, of course, and in Saudi Arabia, certainly, demanding more food and better food, but they also waste food. So if you look upon the amount of food that is produced and that is beneficially used in the world, it is quite a large part of the food is lost due to technical problems, transport and storage primarily. And that is particularly dangerous for fruits, vegetables, those kind of sensible type of food, which are very important from a nutritional point of view, and also from an economic point of view. It's much more easy to store grain, rice, wheat, those kind of things. You can store them over very long periods of time, but fruit, vegetables, animal products, you have to have a short period of time when you eat them, or you deep freeze them. But that means energy use also. Now, the losses of food for technical reasons is about 25% or so in the world. It differs between different countries. Now, in addition to that, we have the waste of food, that people are throwing away the food that is perfectly fit for people to eat. And that is a bigger part of this area, this problem also. So we buy too much and we throw away part of the food that we are not eating. And on the third part, which I'm discussing in the book, is that we have a problem with overeating. We eat too much in relation to medical recommendations. So if you combine losses of food, waste of food, and overeating, it is about half of the total amount of food available. Half, 50%. And that means that we're also wasting the food, the water. We are wasting the energy that goes into the production. We are wasting well, it's a misuse of the land. Because a large, and you know, with increasing production, it tends to increase the acreage also. It means that competition between other ecosystems. And that is a big problem in many parts of the world, loss of biodiversity because of expansion of the agricultural sector. So I think that it's not enough to deal only with production. We have to bring in the consumers into the picture and try to promote sound food habits and reduction. You know, I have some British colleagues who say, we should love food but hate waste. And that's a good point. I do both. Unfortunately, lost because I eat too much. But anyway, that is the point. You have to do both, I think, walk on two legs into the future.
I just wanted to love food and hate waste is a very good claim that that we could keep in mind. One last question I would like to ask both before we conclude. It's the topic of governance. We've been talking about this during our discussion, but it keeps coming back. I would like you to discuss and address the issue of how the use of water, food and consumption needs to be related to a better governance on a global level and on a local level as well.
Yes, I think that we had a discussion about these issues in Cutarolo a couple of days ago, and we had a very good discussion with Deborah
Piovana.
Yeah, sorry. And we agreed that we have to look upon the legal system, the rules, regulations, the role of investments, money, allocation to this sector, but we also have to look upon the consumers, so that's these two. But then we said we have a discussion going on in Sweden saying that it is probably very important. Legal systems take time, and the compliance could be so and so. So we think it's very important that we have a stakeholder dialogue, that the people representing agriculture, hydropower, environmental issues in a basin, that they should be involved in some kind of dialogue. So because one sector cannot do all. It must be a combination. There will be competition for water. There's competition for land. So there must be some kind of agreement between the different parties involved in this process.
Yes,
Alessandro Bratti.
I completely agree. There is a phrase that Giulio Boccaletti also always said that managing water is just to live in a condominium. That, you know, because the institution, the public institution, need to be the administrator of this condominium, but the condominium is done by the different kind of course, of tenants, and so you have to find an equilibrium position. So it's really important to have a dialogue with different stakeholders. And I want to say that the water frame directive that came from Europe is based on this point. You know, that you have also, when you plan, you need to be people involved, the organization involved, and this kind of approach. It's particularly true now because when you have no scarcity, you know, you have no problem. But when you have scarcity that we have in the water scarcity in 2022, to make an agreement among all the different kind of sectors was really, really difficult. And also inside the same sector, because in a basin like Po, that we have 8 regions, it means that you keep the water in Lombardia, in Veneto you have no water. So, and we have had a lot of problems. We have a salt intrusion and other things. So it's very important to have a place to discuss, and of course the playmakers need to be the public institutions. That must be clear, because sometimes in this country it's not so clear.
Yes. First of all, to sum up the conversation that we had today and the conversation that we had starting from Thursday, we could say that in order to achieve a sustainable future for our communities, for humanity and for the planet, it's not only a matter of having the technological expertise, it's not only a matter of culture and research, but mostly a matter of systems approach, of putting all the things together and share it so that we can grow as a community, first of all. Let's give a big round of applause to our guests. Unfortunately, we have to close our event because Professor Lundqvist has a plane to catch in a couple of hours, and we don't want him to miss it. I would like to thank Professor Lundqvist, and it's an open invitation to come back to Padova next year. I would like to also thank Alessandro Bratti. Concludo in italiano, sono gli ultimi secondi del Galileo Festival, quindi volevo fare un paio di ringraziamenti a partire dal direttore scientifico Giovanni Caprara. Volevo ringraziare ovviamente a nome dei promotori, un applauso per Giovanni Caprara che è qui in sala. Volevo ringraziare a nome dei promotori Italipost, Nord-Est Multimedia, Corriere della Sera e Comune di Padova, in particolar modo tutto lo staff che ha partecipato alla costruzione di questa splendida edizione del festival. Abbiamo già ringraziato prima i ragazzi dell'alternanza scuola-lavoro, un centinaio di studenti di scuole superiori che hanno dedicato il loro tempo a questa manifestazione, la giuria dei lettori che questa mattina ha scelto il vincitore, appunto il titolo vincitore del premio Libro dell'anno Innovazione, ma soprattutto grazie a voi. Le sale sono state veramente strapiene di pubblico, e queste manifestazioni senza la partecipazione delle comunità, ancora una volta, avrebbero un senso assai limitato. Quindi grazie a voi, buon pranzo e ci vediamo l'anno prossimo a Padova. Grazie a tutte e a tutti.